I think that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, that should work.
Hello. On behalf of Becky, Julie and Jim, Tricia and Mike, Matthew and Haya, Marlissa and Kevin and Dan and myself, thank you for being here today. Dad loved this church. He loved this church family. He loved Loma Linda University as well, and the patients, students, friends, and colleagues that he worked with every day. Loma Linda was his home, not just geographically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. He loved this place and the people he was privileged to interact with in the 60-plus years that he lived here. When Julie, Tricia, and I were young, Dad had the challenge of getting 3 girls out the door in the morning for school on time. After many reminders to hurry up, he'd finally shout, "Last sweep down the hall," as he made his way down the hall and out the door. We knew we'd better quit dilly-dallying and get out to the car before we'd be left behind. Thank you for being here today as we symbolically accompany Dad on his last sweep down the hall. This is the end of his earthly journey, and he is sleeping peacefully until the morning, and what a great hope that is for us. Several years ago, Dad had major surgery, and while Becky and I waited for Dad to get settled into his room after coming up from recovery, a group of residents came up to the unit to check on him. They shared with us how much Dad meant to them, and their kindness and expressions of affection and respect for him touched my heart more than they knew. And that goes for all of you here today as well. Having you here today to remember Dad and to support us means more to us than you know. While this is not the Thanksgiving season we'd hoped for, it is a time to be thankful for Dad, for the years we had together, and for the assurance that we will see him again. We love him so much. Thank you for loving him too.
So I would like to share some passages that were meaningful to my father, especially in his last days. So in his last days, my father thoroughly enjoyed sitting out on his patio and looking out over this beautiful valley. With his deep love of poetry and the natural world, I could see why the imagery of Psalm 91 was especially meaningful to him, especially in his last days. So this is Psalm 91. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and rampart. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. And moving down to verse 14, where the Lord says, because he holds fast to me, I will deliver him. I will protect him because he knows my name. When he calls me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honor him. With long life, I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. And then when I was thinking about this next passage to read, I was reminded of a story that my father told me a few years ago when we were walking through the FMO, the Faculty Medical Offices up here on Anderson. And I find this story very encouraging, and I hope that you do as well. So for 6 years, my father was a single parent to young girls. He told me that during those years, he often wondered how he would ever make it through. At work, he felt confident and like he knew what he was doing. But as he left work each day to head home to the responsibility of raising 3 daughters, he would duck into one of those small side restrooms, splash some water on his face, take a deep breath, and try to collect himself before stepping into his next role. For 6 years, he said, I just have to take one step after another. and not worry about what is too far ahead. Today, I want to remember the remarkable ways God gave my dad strength when he needed it most, and celebrate the meaningful decades of life that he had after he thought that he could not go on. In his final days, after a long and fulfilling life, my dad knew he would see his Redeemer again at the resurrection. So 2 Timothy 4:7-8 reminds me of him. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. Amen.
Hi, we're going to be giving the life sketch for our dad. This is my older sister, Julie. My name is Matthew. John Lamont Murdoch was born on August 7th in 1938 in Watford, England, to William Gordon Campbell Murdoch and Ruth Rittenhouse Murdoch. He was named after his paternal grandfather, John, but was given the auspicious nickname at birth, that of Wee Lammy. So Wee Lammy was born and raised in England, and WGC, or Billy, as he was known, was born and raised in Scotland. He had met Ruth while pursuing education in the United States. Ruth had grown up in Montana and had been teaching school for several years when they met. The couple married in 1937 and moved to England, where Billy was principal of what is now Newbold College. Billy and Ruth lived in England throughout World War II. Often when the bombs were dropped during the Blitz, the family had to go into the bomb shelter. My dad would tell us regularly about his first memories, peeking over the ridge of his little pram and wondering why all of these people were hiding and what was going on. When Lammy was a toddler, Ruth took him for a medical checkup. The doctor was very distressed to hear that the family was vegetarian. He warned Ruth that it would be detrimental for the little boy. He will never grow up without eating his meat, was the doctor's dire warning. And for any of you who had the privilege of sitting or standing next to my dad, knew what a lie that would be, because he grew up to be 6'6" tall. During his childhood in England, Lammy was very close with his cousins Beryl and Brian Bull, who were about his age. Brian and Lammy were very mischievous little boys, and our cousin Brian lived a little closer to the line of the Blitz than our father did. So when Brian would come to visit, he would say, "Oh, the bombs were much louder where I live. Let me show you." And so the only device they had to imitate the sound of a German bomb dropping was the only toilet in the house. So they would take the lid, slam it down, and say, "Wow, that's about the sound of a bomb." And Brian would say, No, it's not that. You have to do it harder. It's much, much louder." Slammed it down again. "No, it's even louder than that." Slammed it down again. And in their own personal blitzkrieg in the bathroom, they managed to crack the toilet in half, and our entire family had to use the neighbor's toilet from then on out until it was fixed. So both of their mothers were not amused, and neither of them took responsibility for the bombing in the bathroom. 2 years after Lammy's birth, his brother Floyd was born, and 3 years after that, after Floyd, their sister Marilyn joined the family. When Lammy was 8 years old, the Murdochs moved to Australia, where Billy was called upon to be the principal at what is now Avondale College. While on the ship to Australia, another little boy Lammy met told him that the name Wee Lammy probably wouldn't suit a growing boy of his size. So after, in honor of the British war hero, General Montgomery, my dad then started going by Monty, then on out. In Australia, the fourth Murdoch child, WGC Jr., also known as Billy, was born. The four siblings had a wonderful time together with their cousin, David Reeves. They loved living in the Australian bush. My dad has many stories of capturing baby birds out of their nests, chewing up oatmeal to feed them, raising them, and then selling them for a dime in the town. They also have tales of blue-tongued skinks frightening my Aunt Marilyn and possums screeching on the tin roof of their house. They loved the animals of Australia so much that they would collect them. And for one of my dad's birthdays, he said, "Dad, I would like 100 baby chicks for my birthday." They had quite the menagerie there in Australia, to the point where they even wanted to advertise it as a zoo. So they created a sign saying, "To the zoo." Unfortunately, one of the church brethren at the church in Avondale thought this was a cynical jab at WGC Murdoch, insinuating that maybe he was running a zoo there at Avondale. So he tore down the sign, and nobody ever visited my dad's private zoo, much to his dismay.
When Monty was 14, the family moved to the United States, where Billy Sr. joined the faculty of the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C. Monty enrolled at Tacoma Academy and graduated in 1955. Then he went on to Columbia Union College, where he majored in chemistry with minors in math and religion. As a student, he washed dishes in the cafeteria at the Washington Sanitarium. A growing young man, he was always hungry. So he would help himself to the untouched food on the trays that came back to the kitchen before he washed them. We think this must have ignited his love of all hospital cafeteria food. He would take his children out to eat at the hospital cafeteria, much to all of our consternation. And it lasted because even when Becky and Matthew and Marlissa came along, they'd go to visit Los Angeles for the day, and they would go out to eat at the White Memorial Hospital cafeteria. After graduating from college in 1959, Monty headed to the College of Medical Evangelists. 2 years later, it became Loma Linda University School of Medicine. He used to tell us that he carried everything he owned in 2 suitcases when he moved to California. Medical school was a high point in his life, and he made many friends, including roommates Ken Kell and Oral Fisher. Over the years, we've heard numerous stories about this time of his life. He told us about his friend Dick Dunbar, who had a car, and that a group of young medical students would go to the nurse's dorm on Sabbath afternoon and make a general all-call for anyone that would like to go for a Sabbath afternoon drive. When Monty was a senior medical student, one of his friends suggested that he ask out a nursing student named Judy Fallbeck. He arranged a date with her for the upcoming weekend. Sometime during that week, Monty was rushing down the stairs of the hospital and collided with Judy, who was coming up the stairs. They were both so embarrassed that they didn't say anything to each other. They just kept going. That weekend, when Monty picked Judy up for their date, he said, "Haven't I run into you somewhere before?" About a year later, the couple were married in December of 1963.
Monty graduated from,
Sorry, I'm supposed to keep going.
Yeah, you're supposed to
Sorry
keep
about that. Dad graduated from medical school earlier that year in 1963, and we'll hear more about his professional career later in the service. My parents, Monty and Judy, lived in Los Angeles and then in Loma Linda, where I was born. They moved to Baltimore, Maryland for his 18-month fellowship at Johns Hopkins, during which time second daughter Linda was born. And when they returned to Loma Linda, daughter Tricia was born. The growing family enjoyed living in Loma Linda when it was a relatively small town surrounded by orange groves. In 1976, they moved into a house that he and Judy had built, where they forged many meaningful memories with their daughters. And when he and Becky were married and had children, they had many wonderful times in the house as well. Monty and Judy enjoyed yearly summer vacations at Lake Tahoe with their friends Bob and Dawn Rowe and their kids. Dad and Bob would spend the whole week not swimming, not hiking, sitting on the beach, talking about medicine and university politics, and they enjoyed every moment. Being the son of a Scot, Dad was very frugal. The only indulgence he bought for himself was a yellow Firebird with bright orange flames down the sides. He drove this car for about a decade before passing it on to his daughters after they got their driver's licenses. After many happy years, the family experienced great loss with the illness and death of my mother in 1981. As a single parent to 2 teenagers and a 9-year-old, and working full-time, Dad did his best to rise to the challenge with the help of 2 wonderful grandmothers, many caring aunts, uncles, and cousins, and several dear family friends.
Monty met Rebecca Eller, a member of the faculty at the Loma University School of Nursing in this very church. In a few minutes, Becky, my mom, will be sharing the highlights of their story. In 1987, Monty and Becky were married. They went on to have 2 children, son Matthew and daughter Marlissa. The family enjoyed many outings to a variety of national parks and Hawaii. Monty and Becky also enjoyed traveling to various places with Bob Soderblom and the School of Medicine class 1963. Dad faced many challenges. He was a survivor of more than one kind of cancer, as well as a very large benign tumor which required the removal of half of his liver to get out. He required the precise surgical skills of Dr. Herb Ruckel, Mark Reeves, and Alfred Semental. With customary tenacity, he recovered quickly and returned to practice. The story behind the tumor is that we were at Lake Louise in Canada, and he was trying to get into a canoe. He fell between the canoe and the dock and bruised his torso. But when asking him, how is having half of your liver removed, he says, still not as bad as plunging into that cold water. So he recovered very quickly, returned to practice as soon as possible. In later years, he grieved the death of his cousin and wonderful friend, Brian Bull, his dear brother, Bill Murdoch, friends Dale Isaiah, fellow LLUSM Marshal Jeff Kao. Medicine was Dad's calling. I'm sure that some of you have seen him in a medical capacity. Patients were his passion. He wanted to give every single person he treated a personal care, and it was extremely dear to him. And it was so important to him that he didn't retire until the ripe old age of 80, only 7 years ago. During his retirement, though, he was able to take several big trips before the pandemic hit, including finally returning to his beloved Australia, where he got to tour his family home that he lived in there, with Becky, my sister Missy, and his son-in-law, Kevin. Dad's main hobby was gardening. In fact, he once said if he hadn't been a doctor, he would have been a landscape architect. And he had one employee that he put to hard work in that capacity, and I still have to upkeep the garden from time to time. He spent hours in the yard every week tending to his plants. He especially loved orchids and sago palms, and had the world's best grapefruit tree behind the garage. He had a lifetime pass to the living desert in Palm Springs, where he liked to look at the animals, but was more interested in seeing the desert flora and various botanical gardens. Whenever we went to Disneyland, he couldn't give less of a care about the rides or the attractions. He only cared about the landscaping.
Dad also loved poetry. For years, his nightstand held his Bible, his Sabbath School quarterly, and a book of poetry. From time to time, he would pull out a poem and sit one of us down and read it to us. He was a man, truly, with no regrets. Throughout his life, he had a wonderful sense of humor and never took himself too seriously. Here's an example. In his later life, he loved to tell the story of how he was reading an article in a prestigious professional medical journal. He was surprised and delighted to see an article that he'd written many years earlier referenced in the research article. But there was a footnote beside the reference, so he went down the page to read the comment about his research, and the comment just said, "Before the modern era." He thought this was a very funny story. Dad was immensely proud of his 4 grandchildren, Nathan, James, Benjamin, and Judy. Family was very important to him. Through the years, he stayed close to his siblings and many cousins. Even during his last illness, his nephew Paul Herman and cousin Beryl Bull provided excellent care and medical advice.
So we've been referring to his house quite a bit, but what some of you might not know if you haven't visited is that it's up on a hill overlooking this very campus. And he was very proud of that view. In his final days, Dad enjoyed sitting on his patio looking out over the valley. From this view, his home encompassed the most meaningful places in his life: the hospital, the medical clinics, the homes of friends, family, and patients, and this church, where he was very involved through the years as an elder, a deacon, and a greeter, among other positions. Dad felt a great sense of serenity being able to enjoy the complex tapestry of his life and legacy in one sweeping vista. Near the end of his life, after his first stroke, his vocabulary became very limited, but when I would sit out there with him, he still remembered to say, "Beautiful, beautiful," over and over again when looking at the view. He enjoyed watching the changing seasons from his viewpoint and would often comment on the jacarandas when they bloomed or the snow dusting the distant mountain peaks. This view was spread out before him on the morning he passed away. Dad died peacefully at home on October 27, surrounded by Becky and his 5 children. He is survived by his beloved wife, Becky, Julie and her husband, Jim, Linda and her husband, Dan, Tricia and her husband, Mike, Matthew and my wife, Haya, Marlissa and her husband, Kevin, Brother Floyd and his wife, Lynetta, Sister Marilyn and her husband, Cliff, sister-in-law, Jeannie, the widow of his beloved younger brother, Billy, his 4 cherished grandchildren, numerous dear nieces and nephews, cousins, in-laws, friends, and patients. We will miss him terribly, but we look forward to seeing him again on the great morning.
I stand here pleading your indulgence, especially that of my beloved family. This is my love story and my testimony to God's goodness. Matthew, would you come stand with me? Okay. I first heard the Murdoch name in this sanctuary as Pastor Lou Venden stepped forward to solicit prayers for a Murdoch family whose young wife and mother had lost her battle with a rare and mysterious disease. Her name was Judy Fallbeck Murdoch. It was September 1981, and I was moved. I heard it whispered about me, what is going to happen to those sweet girls? Again, I felt compassion for these children whose lives had been terribly interrupted. The first time I saw Dr. Murdoch was when I was working a shift in the medical center. At one of the units where he had patients, I think it was probably 6,200. As another nurse and I stood in the center station, she said, "Here comes poor Dr. Murdoch. His wife just died." I looked and I saw a tall figure, head bent, striding down the hall toward us. I thought, poor Dr. Murdoch, that's really sad. I first met Dr. Murdoch in this sanctuary. It was in the old breezeway behind us here. We were there for a luncheon in the old fellowship hall. Someone introduced us, and we happened to sit across the table from each other. As I recall, he did most of the talking. He spoke of his family, each of his daughters, Julie, Linda, and Tricia, his career, his pride in his Scottish heritage, and the blue blood Adventist family from which he came. And he happened to mention he had a sister named Marilyn Herman. I knew Marilyn. She was my colleague in the School of Nursing. I was impressed by this man, who seemed easy and unpretentious, and I recognized integrity, something which I had not found in prior relationships, nor even in myself. And besides, he was tall and dark, so very handsome, and there was all that dignified gravitas. A week or two later, we had a chance encounter in the small church parking lot. I was surprised when he asked for my phone number, and a week or two later, he called. Our first official date was a fall festival. I said to him, "I will go with you if you dress up." His idea was to come in a cowboy hat and maybe a blue shirt, you know. We had a great time. Mostly our dating was with a group of friends with whom we enjoyed going places. This kept it uncomplicated. My appreciation for Monty grew to genuine admiration. He was keen of intellect, gentlemanly and kind, excellent in his professional practice, spoke lovingly of his 3 daughters, spoke often of the blue blood Adventist family to which he belonged and his proud Scottish heritage. He seemed to like spending time with me, and I was flattered and honored that he would seek me out. But I felt compelled to have chats about what this meant. This can't go beyond friendship, I would say. We cannot be seen together. This community is a fishbowl. What will people say? He was probably the most eligible bachelor in town. He had stature and status. Eventually, I did risk being seen with Monty, and our dating life began. And believe me, people did talk. Why do people do that? Negative rumors about the other began to reach us. One individual presented me with several handwritten legal-sized pages of what I would face if I pursued a relationship with Dr. Murdoch, implying I was not qualified. He's a very important man, and if you get a divorce, you will be blamed, regardless of whose fault it is. Of course, there were other matters that I perceived as obstacles. I was 11 and a half years his junior, well more than that many inches shorter. I perceived myself as perhaps a more humble clinical nurse and assistant professor of nursing. Oh, and then there were the 3 Ps. Monty's office was across the street from West Hall, where I worked. When we were each keeping office hours, I would like to cross the street to visit. The first time or two when I walked into his office, I was blown away by one entire wall covered with plaques. I knew he had published scores of professional articles during his fellowship at Johns Hopkins, and that these had helped propel him to a full professorship at a relatively young age. Now these plaques. Monty, always humble, simply quipped dismissively, the 3 Ps, publications, professorship, and plaques. It became our private joke. I met Tricia first. One of my earliest memories is when she and Monty were on their way to parent-daughter banquet at Loma Academy. They stopped by my home. Statuesque Tricia had on a peach-colored sheath dress, her wavy blonde hair, and a shoulder-length bob. They looked great, and I proudly snapped pictures. I met Julie next. I think it was Christmas, and Julie met us in the front room. She was effervescent and ebullient, an engaged conversationalist. Linda, the last I was to meet, did not want to acknowledge me. I didn't blame her. I was just another lady her father had paraded before his daughter. Linda, now my cherished friend. Monty's wonderful mother, Ruth Murdoch, invited me for Sabbath lunch several times. One such occasion, I met the elder statesmen of the clan. They were Todd and Claudia Murdoch, and Nancy and Stanley Bull. They were lovely, rather imperious people, speaking in their English, Scottish brogues. I believe I was being vetted. I'm going to skip the next story. If you want to ask me about it later, you can. But except to say that through Monty's single years, his cousin, Brian Bull, was his friend and confidant. And Brian was a great source of support. There was an event that was a stumbling block to both of us, but especially a source of perplexity to Monty. And Brian did help to sort that out. I suggested to see a counselor if this was going to go further in a city far away. This counselor was encouraging, though he perceived us to be, well, too analytical and anxious. So he said, you guys are taking this too seriously. You need to learn to play. I want you to buy 2 water pistols and go into the hills and have a good old water gun fight. Can't you see Dr. Murdoch running through the hills with a water pistol? Monty was emphatic about his love for me, and I treasure some of the most beautiful love letters ever written. And I certainly loved him. During this time, we did pray, and I came across 2 Bible texts that I believe were for me. Isaiah 43:19 says, "Behold, I do a new thing. Now it will spring forward. Will you not know it?" Another one was Isaiah 54:2, and it says, "Enlarge the place of your tent and stretch out the curtains of your dwellings. Do not spare. Lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes." Well, we became semi-engaged in February of 1987. Still, the relationship seemed to be proceeding in fits and starts. We each made any number of, albeit unsuccessful, attempts to halt. Things felt too complicated. I was intimidated and afraid. Monty was perplexed. Well, I broke off the relationship. And this time, Monty was gone. During this time, a man friend for whom I had long carried a torch asked me out. I went. Upon returning me home, he said, "I think I would like to date you." I thought about a nanosecond, and then I said, "I don't think so. I think there is someone else I'm thinking about." Shortly after this, Monty did reach out to me, and I was thrilled. To Monty's credit, he had gone to the counselor on his own. To the counselor's credit, he told Monty that if he didn't go after me, he would miss out on good things. We resumed the engagement and pursued our plans with joyous abandon. We were madly in love. I have always been grateful for his patience. Our wedding was perfect. It was idyllic, and we were blessed by the full support of both sides of the family. When I saw it was Monty waiting for me at the end of that aisle, I couldn't believe it. I knew I could trust him. It also meant he trusted me. The day was Sunday, November 29, 1987, 38 years ago, almost to the day. And that fern there, Monty carefully nurtured it for 38 years. It was part of the decoration at our wedding. After a blissful honeymoon in Hawaii, we returned home. It was then I entered the home of Tricia Murdoch. What did I know of teenagers, especially this tall, smart, very pretty one? I entered ignorant and naive, ill-equipped and self-absorbed. You see, we were each navigating our own developmental priorities. I, as a new wife and later a new mom, I was living in the midst of Monty's looming family, a number of which lived within 3-mile radius of me. My wonderful mother-in-law lived 2 blocks away. I was also attempting to make a home in another wife and mother's home. Early in our marriage, I had a dream. In that dream, Judy Murdoch met me in the entryway of her home. She very graciously showed me her home and proudly displayed photographs of her family. Tricia was caught up in being the work of a teenager. She was faced with monumental learning tasks, such as academic and social challenges, and ultimately decisions about college and career. In the meantime, she had a new stepmother and later a baby brother in her life. Sharing her father's attention with these new people, I imagine, may have been difficult. I remember when Tricia turned 16 and the honor I had of helping to arrange a trip to Hard Rock Cafe with a number of her friends. I will be forever grateful for her acceptance of her little brother, Matthew. She was a senior at Loma Academy and was taking the family class they were required to take. The fun it was to dress a 10-pound sack of flour and paste a baby face on it. I will never forget what she said when I later asked what she thought of her little brother, and she said, "He's the best thing that has happened to this family." As I recall my life with Monty, it's bookended by the tough and wonderful early years and the latter years. I was now called to walk slowly as my husband's body and mind faltered. Being naturally restless and impatient, I could be prone to frustration, but thank God for 1 Timothy 6:6. It says, "Godliness with contentment is great gain." And I treasured this season. Monty's dry sense of humor, which had always attracted me to him, somehow remained intact. He could still crack me up, and our propensity for nonsense dispelled many a stressor. He still enjoyed a good chuckle, and it would make everything better. He always maintained his bemused smile. Any committed partnership is always bookended by the early years and the latter years. My experience was bookended by 2 kinds of love, that of passion and that of compassion. But it's the years in between of which life is made. It's the years of the daily and mundane, the workaday, the highs and lows of our rites of passage, the messiness of our family community. Count it a privilege if you dwell there. My friend Anita Roberts admonishes to be the hands and feet of Jesus. This is proactive, action-oriented love. Acts of kindness. Love may look like warm hugs, gifts, generosity. Love may be expressed in words of kindness, empathy, support, encouragement, and affirmation. I've heard Pastor Randy say, when it comes to the grieving, show up and shut up. One's presence through eye contact and active engagement and listening is an act of love. Monty's love language was acts of service. He courted me by sneaking into my backyard to prune my apricot tree, or sneaking into my front porch to scrub tar and grease off my white sneakers on a Sunday morning after we had taken a walk along the railroad tracks the day before. Not always emotionally expressive, his language was faithfulness and consistency and generosity because he took great pride in providing for his family. Much has been written about love, but I choose to look no further than the Gospels of Jesus, especially the book of John. In them is revealed a man called Jesus Christ. I believe that God sent his very face in the form of Jesus Christ. God revealed himself as Jesus walked this planet between the cradle and the cross, to borrow from Pastor Randy's upcoming sermon series. The divinity and humanity of Jesus is a mystery, but then so is love. My faith and hope are built on nothing less than Jesus Christ. His righteousness, his death and resurrection. As Jesus declared to Martha, the sister of Lazarus, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. John 11:25. Because of this, death's sting has been eliminated. The grave has lost its hold. Personally, death is abhorrent to me. I reject the permanence of the grave because, as Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, God has created us with eternity in our hearts. Some here share this belief. Others may question it or have a different version. For some, this belief is not part of their heritage, but thank you for letting me share mine. Truth be told, Monty and I were two flawed human beings with certain inherent limitations. Life with another person often presents a significant learning curve. It offers the potential to expose things about ourselves that need change and the potential for growth, and I am grateful for this. As he lived his life, my Monty passed into death with dignity. He was at home, surrounded by his family. It was painless and peaceful. Monty gifted me his heart in Matthew and Marlissa. Julie, Linda, and Tricia gifted us space with grace. Thank you. It was the honor of a lifetime to have known and loved Lamont Murdoch.
I will now read cherished words of comfort from the word of the Lord. In a flash, listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Blessed be the word of the Lord. A bit hard to speak after that. To Becky and to all of Monty's beloved children and precious family, I had great affection, appreciation, and respect for Dr. Monty Murdoch. I personally found him to be a gentle giant, gentle and kind, genteel and caring, thoughtful and wise. Monty was a presence. Some thought of him as a gentle giant. Others thought of him as bearing gravitas that was admirable.
but almost everyone thought of him as a friend. He was a physician and a churchman, a believer and a scientist, a friend and a thinker. But most of all, Monty was a husband and a father. Becky said to me, Monty was a man of science but deeply appreciated beauty. He loved poetry. In fact, the only time he became tearful was in reading poetry. As I sat talking with Becky and Missy, they said that their husband and father loved Revelation, and in particular, he loved one text in the 21st chapter. With your permission, I'll read the surrounding verses as well. They're familiar verses, but always worth rehearing, and certainly worth rehearing at moments like these. John the Revelator writes, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, the dwelling place of God is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. And they will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.' He who was seated on the throne said, 'I am making everything new. Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true.'" It's understandable why we read that passage often at moments like this. In very brief language, it lays out the plan of God for a world torn by sorrow and sin, hatred, and death. It speaks of beauty, of a new heaven and a new earth, of God dwelling among his people, and of God making everything new. And then, just as we're about to pinch ourselves and ask, am I dreaming or is this true? The last words appear, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." It is nestled within that context that appears the verse about which Becky and Missy spoke. It's Revelation 21:4. "He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." From that verse, maybe three thoughts to consider today. First, there is an old order, and we are in it. There's an old order, and we are in it. The old order is made up of a dignified physician sitting in another physician's office and hearing bad news. The old order is made up of that struggle, that battle for health and wellness and long life. The old order is made up of the fear that no doubt lurks at night, the tears that spring forth when alone, the uncertainty of the future. The old order is a family gathering in a sanctuary, a sanctuary filled with memories, with worship, with hope, and yet today a sanctuary mixed with that bittersweet mixture of tears and hope. That's the old order. The old order is outlined by John the Revelator by speaking of mourning and crying and suffering and death. There is an old order, and we are in it. But secondly, from this verse, God has a handkerchief, and he will use it. God has a handkerchief, and he will use it. These words call to mind the image of a grandpa, maybe Monty, of a grandpa out in the yard with the grandkids, running and playing, rough and tumble, falling, scraping a knee, an arm abrasion, and Grandpa coming alongside and kneeling down and pulling out that oft-used handkerchief and wiping away the tears. There. It'll be okay. You'll survive. It's that image. I mean, imagine that image of the God of the universe. He has a handkerchief, and he'll use it. To me, one of the enduring quotes of the book of Revelation are the words by Henry Wright. The handkerchief of Revelation wipes away the tears of Genesis. The handkerchief of Revelation wipes away the tears of Genesis. That truly is what the last 2 chapters of this book are all about. They're about that time of reunion, that time of renewal, that time when all is made new, that time when tears are wiped away and banished forever. There's an old order, and we are in it. God has a handkerchief, and he will use it. But thirdly, from these words comes the thought, Jesus made a promise, and he will keep it. Jesus made a promise, and he will keep it. We think it may have been the very same John who penned the words describing the last night with his disciples before the crucifixion. I find Fred Craddock's description of that night to be matchless. He says the disciples were like children who are playing in front of the fireplace only to look up and see mom and dad grabbing coat and keys and purse. Children the world over, said Craddock, have basically the same 3 questions. Where are you going? Can we come? Then who's going to stay with us? Where are you going? Jesus says, I go to the Father's house to prepare a place for you. Can we come? Not now. Not now. Then who's going to stay with us? I will not leave you orphans. I will send you the Spirit, the Comforter, to be with you forever. It's embedded in those words that we find maybe the most clear, the most simple, and yet the most powerful description of the promise Jesus made. He said, I go, but if I go, I will come again. So simple, Becky. Just simple words. A promise. It is echoed here in this verse in the book of Revelation. After describing the old order that we are in, after speaking of God having a handkerchief that he will use, it is re-echoed by the voice from the throne that says, "Write this down. These words are trustworthy and true." That's his promise. It is a promise on which I have staked my life. When I met with Missy and Becky, they were kind enough to loan me a book called Christ Our Victory. The author's name on the cover is William Gordon Murdoch. Inside the well-worn cover, best wishes for the new year to Lamont and Judy from the author, Daddy. Just one entry. Not the entire entry, but a portion of it, because I think it speaks so well of this gentle giant, this dignified scientist, this friend. The author, Daddy, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven," Matthew 5:3. The Greek word used in the New Testament for blessed can be translated with equal accuracy as happy or joyful. The one who is blessed is truly happy. What we need is to discover the secret of a happy life. Joseph Addison once said, "The grand essentials to happiness in this life are something to do, something to love, and something to hope for." The Christian possesses all three. Happiness cannot be bought. Indeed, money has very little to do with it. It is not found by those who seek it, but by those who give it away. True happiness has a constant, enduring quality. It is found only in the abiding peace and rest of spirit that Christ can give you. There is no joy to compare with that of helping someone find the Savior. Let us work for this true and lasting joy rather than seek the fleeting pleasures of this life. I chose that one because as I read it, I could picture him being the embodiment of what his father there wrote. We gather here today then to remember this singular and unique gentleman. We do so certainly with sorrow that is deep and real, but we also do so with a hope that is vital and true. These words from his verse, "There's an old order and we are in it, but God has a handkerchief and he will use it, because Jesus made a promise and he will keep it." So in the coming days, until then, may you walk in the joy, the grace, the healing, and the comfort of Jesus.
My name is Marlissa House, and I am the youngest of Monty's 5 children. My dad was a man of science, but he also had an appreciation for art and would often seek out a beautiful garden or an inspiring song. He had a particular fondness for poetry, as has been mentioned. I have his book of poems here with me. He was a generally stoic man, but poetry was one of the few things that would bring tears to his eyes. I'd like to read one of his favorite poems, "The Chambered Nautilus" by Oliver Wendell Holmes. This is the ship of pearl, which poets feign sails the unshadowed main, the ventrous bark that flings on the sweet summer wind its purpled wings, in gulfs enchanted where the siren sings and coral reefs lie bare, where the cold sea maids rise to sun their streaming hair. Its webs of living gauze no more unfurl. Wrecked is the ship of pearl and every chambered cell where its dim dreaming life was wont to dwell, as the frail tenant shaped his growing shell, before thee lies revealed, its irised ceiling rent, its sunless crypt unsealed. Year after year beheld the silent toil that spread his lustrous coil. Still as the spiral grew, he left the past year's dwelling for the new, stole with soft step its shining archway through, built up its idle door, stretched in his last found home and knew the old no more. Thanks for the heavenly message brought by thee, child of the wandering sea, cast from her lap forlorn. From thy lips a clearer note is born than ever Triton blew from wreathed horn, while on mine ear it rings. Through the deep caves of thought I hear a voice that sings. Build thee more stately mansions, O my soul. Build thee more stately mansions, O my soul, as the swift seasons roll. Leave thy low vaulted past. Let each new temple nobler than the last shut thee from heaven with a dome more vast, till thou at length art free, leaving thine outgrown shell by life's unresting sea. My dad made it his top priority to support each of his children in our academic endeavors. Helping us with our homework was his love language, and with his 5 children, he would often joke that not every parent is lucky enough to pay tuition over the course of 4 decades. When I was in 7th grade, Dad helped me pick out a poem to memorize and recite for a school assignment. He picked out The Daffodils by William Wordsworth, which is one of my favorite poems to this day. The Daffodils. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in a sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils. Thank you.
John Lamont Murdoch's formal education spanned 3 continents. He started primary school in England, finished elementary school and began secondary education in Australia, and completed high school in Tacoma Park, Maryland. He enrolled at Columbia Union College, now Washington Adventist University, in 1955, and in 1959 completed a Bachelor of Arts degree in chemistry. Upon completion of college, he began studies toward the Doctor of Medicine degree at Loma University. After graduating medical school in 1963, he took a 1-year internship at White Memorial and returned to Loma University for internal medicine residency, and then stayed on for fellowship training in endocrinology and metabolism. During his last graduate medical education year at Loma Linda University, he had the distinction of serving as the first internal medicine chief resident at the then brand new Loma Linda University Medical Center. In 1967, he went east to Johns Hopkins University, where he studied under the direction of Victor A. McCusick, a man widely known as the father of medical genetics. While at Johns Hopkins, he worked closely with a friend named Brian Walker. The two of them had very different heights, with Monty being quite tall, as mentioned before, about 6 foot 6 inches. Whenever pictures were needed illustrating the height of patients, one of the two would stand next to the patient, carefully chosen to make tall patients look very tall and short patients appear very short. Consequently, Dr. Murdoch's image next to some short people with masked eyes has shown up in a number of lecture halls at august institutions across the country. There's just a hint of mischief on his face in every one of them. After finishing fellowship training, Dr. Murdoch returned to Loma Linda University, rising rapidly through the academic ranks to full professor in 1981. While a faculty member at Loma Linda, Dr. Murdoch served in a variety of roles at various times, including coordinator of student teaching in internal medicine, chief of the Division of Endocrinology and Metabolism, and vice chair of the department. He was an active member of the medical staff at Loma Linda University Medical Center from his first appointment in 1969 until his retirement in 2019. In addition to his work within the university, Dr. Murdoch served as supervisor of the endocrinology clinics at Arrowhead Regional Medical Center and Riverside University Hospital. Dr. Murdoch was a born educator, and his educational endeavors pervaded every aspect of his life. To me, he was Uncle Monty, a title and role that in no way inhibited him from giving me academic advice. He would often tell me at the end of each school year what classes would likely be coming in the fall and would recommend that I prepare for them by obtaining textbooks on the topics and reading up on them over the summer months. His advice related to physical education classes, however, was quite different and fairly unorthodox. In contrast to the cognitive subjects, I was advised to expend as little effort as possible preparing for phys ed over the summer. He sagely explained to me that PE teachers reward either physical prowess or marked improvement. Put bluntly, my best bet was to go for improvement. During medical school, he broadened my horizons. As I had been initially drawn to the field of psychiatry and his brother Bill was a child and adolescent psychiatrist, Uncle Monty informed me that for each day I spent on a child psychiatry rotation, I would be expected to spend one day on an endocrinology rotation. Consequently, I had a 2-week elective in endocrinology that I would not otherwise have taken. While Uncle Monty taught me much, I do feel I was able to contribute, along with my cousins, to his training in patience. En route to Uncle Bill's wedding, my family spent a couple of weeks at my grandparents' house in Berrien Springs. What made it particularly special was that Uncle Monty, Aunt Judy, and my 3 cousins, Julie, Linda, and Tricia, were there along with Uncle Floyd and his family. With all of us in a 2-bedroom house, there weren't many quiet moments. In the basement, my grandparents had an old ping pong table. This was ping pong, not table tennis. The table having been constructed from parts of an old garage door and a sheet of plywood resting on sawhorses. One side of the table did contain some residual green paint, but not of the official shade. As an 11-year-old kid, I was still a competitor by nature and would drag whatever uncle, parent, sister, or cousin was available down to the basement to play ping pong. I could never beat Uncle Monty. We would start out, I'd get way ahead, but by the time we got to 21, it was always him with the 21. During one match with Uncle Floyd, I was introduced to the 11-point game. Uncle Floyd explained to me that the chief advantage of the 11-point game, 2 chances to win in the same amount of time. At my next game with Uncle Monty, I decided we would play to 11. He seemed a bit puzzled as the service turned over so rapidly, but otherwise all seemed normal until I announced excitedly at a score of 10-2 that it was game point and I was winning. Although he won the next 7 points in a row, I managed to eke out a win at 11-9. As I bounded up the stairs, the first person I ran into was Aunt Judy, whose eyes just danced and twinkled as I told her of my good fortune. When I took my first breath, she said, "Don't play ping pong with him again. It'll drive him nuts." She was right, but it sure would be nice to play again.
My name is Kevin Cadornas. I first want to thank Becky and the family for the honor of being able to share a few thoughts about Dr. Murdoch. I first met Dr. Murdoch as a medical student, and I probably should pause right there because, you have to forgive me, I continue to call him Dr. Murdoch despite his insistence of making him call him Monty. When I rejoined the faculty practice, I just could never feel comfortable calling him Monty due to the profound respect and the gravitas that Dr. Murdoch holds. At first, I don't remember actually what surrounded our first interaction. All I remember is how he made me feel. At first glance, a tall, imposing presence quickly turned into a warm and inviting interaction as he greeted me with his characteristic wide smile and distinctive slight crackle in his voice that calmed both the nerves of patients and medical students alike. His joy for the subject matter and his expert clinical acumen quickly made endocrinology come alive for me. I owe so much to Dr. Murdoch, and it is because of him that I first found that love for endocrinology. He somehow made complex hormonal pathways simple to understand using extraordinary teaching skills with anecdotes such as, it's quite simple actually, when you want to test if something is high, well, you just suppress it, and if you want to see if it's low, well, try to stimulate it. He had some of the most interesting and intriguing lectures, again, making difficult concepts come alive with simple diagrams and hand-drawn hormone feedback loops. And as I was thinking back on Dr. Murdoch and reflecting, I had remembered that I actually had saved one of his lectures from medical school just because I held it so dearly, one of my favorite glands, the pituitary gland, and you can see some of his hand-drawn diagrams that he had within this lecture. So I hold this dearly. I don't think that there's too many of those left around, actually. So these lectures made everything come alive for me. And he really enjoyed everything that he was involved with in his teaching and his clinical practice. He wanted to continue to treat his patients with kindness and respect. He wanted to continue teaching well into his later years. And in the same way that he taught students and residents, he would teach patients as well, writing these same diagrams on paper and showing them exactly what their disease process was and how he was going to treat it. Most of all, though, what I learned from Dr. Murdoch in early interactions and then throughout residency was firsthand how to embody Christ-like whole person care, a truly magnificent example to learn from during his patient interactions. You couldn't help but feel you were going to be okay when he smiled and said things were going to be all right. Years later, I still use some of the idioms with my own patients that he used to say to his own, such as, "Don't worry, Graves' disease doesn't mean you have one foot in the grave, just that Dr. Graves invented it, so you're gonna be just fine." Or, "Just a touch of methimazole is gonna cool you right down. You're gonna feel right better." I loved how he would draw these hormone feedback loops for patients so that they could understand their disease process, something I have also taken from him and do with my own patients. He's also taught me some important things of what not to do from his own experience, such as certain gestures. When talking to a patient about recommending a total thyroidectomy, one time he told me, "Don't use this gesture to say you're going to remove their thyroid." He said it really didn't get the point across that he was trying to make. And he would laugh, as you all know. He continued to provide such important mentorship throughout my residency years and encouragement through my fellowship, and it was his support and belief in me that gave me the opportunity to come back to Loma University. I will always be indebted to him for having faith in me and helping me to further my career. Dr. Murdoch will truly be missed by so many. His teaching and mentorship have left a legacy with decades of students and residents, and years later, I still hear stories of patients in our clinical practice that say how much they miss him and how much he meant to them. He loved serving so much that he worked up to the age of 80. And actually, there was a party at Dr. Hegstad's house years before he actually ended his clinical practice, and he turned to me at the very end of the evening. He said, "I don't think they know it yet, but I'm going to keep going for a little bit." To me, I will always remember him for so many things: a master teacher, a compassionate leader, a pillar of Loma Linda University, a humble servant of God, a genius diagnostician, a caring healer, and genuinely a kind person to all. I think his most important legacy is what I saw that first day as a medical student, is how he made you feel, as he always welcomed you with a genuine sense that you mattered. There's a quote by Maya Angelou that says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." While I still remember much of what Dr. Murdoch has taught me, there's nothing more powerful than his gentle and joyful way of showing Christ's love. I look forward to the day that I will see his bright smile once again as we meet and when Christ calls us home. Thank you.
Today, we remember, mourn, and celebrate a life. In our time together, a mosaic will emerge that crystallizes memories of a great man who stood tall among us. In the next 8 minutes, I will share perspectives as Dr. Murdoch's student and colleagues, later as department chair. Initially, I experienced him as a teacher. Later, I became aware of his remarkable early career work as a prolific scholar. Later still, I found a significant omission in what he taught us. That omission or gap may have been an inevitable consequence of Lamont Murdoch's character and values. With the tile I place in the Lamont Murdoch mosaic today, I intend to close that gap. Dr. Murdoch was my teacher, too. He was internal medicine course director during my senior year in 1980. His lectures were crisp, practical, and highlighted with photos of tall guys and short patients and diagrams. At the bedside, he was a physician modeling knowledge and expertise directed to the pursuit of healing. Those of us who experienced his lectures and his guidance at the bedside know firsthand his passion and gifts as a teacher and physician beloved by patients. Students at Loma Linda University, at Western University of Health Science, and at Kaiser Fontana 14 times presented him with their highest teaching awards. In 2009, I became chair of the Department of Medicine on the Loma Linda campus. Lamont Murdoch, professor of medicine, head of the Division of Endocrinology, welcomed me to campus, offering steady support. He and Becky joined younger colleagues for intern welcome dinners and department celebrations. With an eye on the future, he recruited Dr. Cadornas to the Division of Endocrinology. Later, as head of that division, Dr. Cadornas grew the division to 7 physicians, making it possible for Dr. Murdoch to retire at age 80. Dr. Murdoch celebrated that renewal and growth of the division. After hearing the news of Dr. Murdoch's death nearly a month ago, I met over lunch with Department of Medicine staff members who had worked directly with Dr. Murdoch. We shared stories and a few tears. I asked, in your work with Dr. Murdoch, what attribute stood out? Responses included, he was always respectful. He always wore a tie. He was formal and friendly. He was a good communicator. Then one person surprised me. I admired Dr. Murdoch for his humility. Before long, a second person nodded her head. That's it. I appreciated his humility. Meetings were never about him. They were always directed toward making things better. The comments caught me off guard. Over a piquant tabbouleh salad, I asked, "Do you know of any of Dr. Murdoch's awards or publications?" I got blank looks. Later, I asked physicians who had Dr. Murdoch as their teacher, "What do you know of his scholarly work and publications?" Same stare. So what did Dr. Murdoch teach me and others? Here's an example. He taught us the physical findings of Marfan syndrome. Because of him, we knew about high arched palates, lens disarticulations, the wrist sign, the thumb sign, and let me try to say it, geno recurvatum. Almost none of us students or residents had heard of the Walker-Murdoch sign. We knew it only as the wrist sign. Now, let me revisit the idea of Lamont Murdoch and humility. Golda Meir, the often acerbic former prime minister of Israel, once hissed at a guest, "Don't be so humble, you're not that great." Her imperative hints at an interesting idea that real humility can only be realized after real accomplishment. Now, if an early career faculty member were to publish work in the New England Journal of Medicine, the most widely read medical journal on the planet, or in the Annals of Internal Medicine, the preeminent journal of internal medicine, their legacy might be assured. Let me try a metaphor some of you who aren't from the academic world can understand. Publication in those journals in the first year or two of faculty appointment might be comparable to a rookie Major League Baseball hitter hitting 65 home runs. Monty Murdoch's rookie years spread from 1969 to 72. He achieved the academic equivalent of 65 home runs. This article appeared in 1969 with his short colleague Brian Walker and Lamont Murdoch as the authors, Life Expectancy and the Causes of Death in Marfan Syndrome, Annals of Internal Medicine. 1972, early in his career here at Loma Linda. Let's see. New England Journal of Medicine, the lead article, 5 pages, Lamont Murdoch, first author. And then sandwiched between them, an article that at the time didn't get quite as much buzz, 1970, Archives of Internal Medicine, the wrist sign. Now this particular article is one of any I could have chosen among perhaps 20 that actually are out there highlighting the Walker-Murdoch sign. This particular article was published in 2017 in the University of New Delhi Journal of Medical Sciences. 48 years after Brian Walker and Lamont Murdoch described the wrist sign. Short story. The Walker-Murdoch sign has become an immortal medical eponym, joining Addison's disease, Shane-Stokes respiration, Argyll-Robertson pupils, and others. It's known across time and across the planet. Lamont Murdoch taught us the wrist sign. He didn't tell us its name. He didn't tell us that physicians around the world call it the Walker-Murdoch sign. So now you know the great omission and perhaps appreciate the role of humility in creating this gap. Okay, everybody. There it is. Now, we've got some work to do. Right now, we're going to learn the Walker-Murdoch sign. Raise your dominant hand. Okay, take that hand and put the fingers around your opposite wrist. If your little finger crosses over the thumbnail while you're doing that, immediately after this service, please make an appointment with your physician or go to the emergency room. And if your fifth finger doesn't overlay the thumb, you don't need to worry. You're going to be okay. And Dr. Murdoch would want you to know that. On quiet weekend mornings over a cup of hot chocolate, or on an evening with a glorious sunset, you will want to recheck your Walker-Murdoch sign and know again that you're okay. As you remember the physician who paired excellence and humility, a man to be remembered for his kindness, resilience, and loyalty to the mission, and a master teacher who left you with the joyous task of teaching students and trainees here in Loma Linda what students and trainees all over the planet have learned, the name of the wrist sign, Walker-Murdoch. As you reach your fingers about your wrist, remember the man who stood tall in every sense, and share some of the stories you hear today, adding your own tiles to the mosaic that will honor his memory and inspire continuing good work in the pursuit of making man whole.
It's a privilege for me to be allowed to share some memories of Dr. Murdoch. The first one is a story he told me that is before the profession, before the professional career. So his grandmother in Scotland had a child, and there was the loss of the child and illness, and in a theologically complicated way, would you ever see that child again? Or would that child suffer eternal punishment? And so a colporteur, an Adventist colporteur, came to their home and talked to the grandmother and said, well, you know, maybe it isn't that way. And they had Bible studies. And from that, what you might say, inconsequential visit of a colporteur began the Adventist journey of the Murdochs. And he was very conscious of that, and it made an impact on me too, because my dad was a colporteur in a sort of low prestige profession. You can still experience some things that have huge consequences. Now, many European families have come to America and enriched the world church and the Adventist church in this country and beyond. We have the Murdochs, we have the Hardings, we have the Maxwells, we have, who else? The Keoghs, you know, big Adventist names. But I think it's hard to exceed the impact of the Murdochs on the Adventist church in so many ways. So it was very privileged to hear him tell that story. He told it several times. I needed to hear it over because it is such a special story. So here is one from the professional thing. So I have wondered, maybe you can help me. I have wondered whether he spoke 1.5 times as fast as the rest of us, or twice as fast as the rest of us, because I think he spoke faster than the average. Maybe it was the residue of a Scottish accent. Maybe it was Australian, I don't know. But he didn't speak pure American. And he spoke, almost a little staccato, and with emphasis. Everything was with emphasis. That made it possible for him to do a patient history faster than anyone else. But he could do it with economy and precision and with thoroughness, even so, and he did the same in his lectures. It was very succinct, very focused, no excess lard or anything. It was all substance. So he was an amazing pedagogue and a role model for many of us here. So here is another one. In the mid-90s, there was a big upheaval in the Department of Medicine at Loma Linda University, and many of the people who had been my beloved mentors and in training, many of them decided to leave. They were very upset about some things that had happened. And I think that on substance, Dr. Murdoch agreed with those who left. And it was also quite tempting to join them, because these people had been bonded in a professional fellowship that mattered to him as well. And I think he was on the verge of leaving, but he didn't. He stayed. And we have heard that he has served Loma Linda for 50 years. So why did he stay? I think it was the sort of lasting, enduring impact of the Adventist in him, the commitment to the church, the commitment to Loma Linda University. And when I came back after many years away, at least he was there, and he was as towering a figure as he had ever been. And then my last memory. So when I came here to teach in the School of Religion in 2007, I had until that time been mostly a physician, and my professional sense of identity was medical. And I had been promised that I would be allowed to work some in medicine here too, in addition to teaching. So, and I had a conversation with him over at my office. He came over very quickly, very soon after I had arrived. And we talked a little, and he said, well, when can you start? So yes, I started working in the endocrine clinic, which I thought was quite a trust for him to let me do that. And it went well. It worked out very well, and I was very grateful to him for allowing me to continue in my primary sense of calling and my sense of vocation. And every so often, when I meet his sister Marilyn, she tells me, "Oh, Monty always said that I should only have been a doctor. That I should only have been doing medicine." So. And then I wonder, well, he may have thought I didn't do very well in biblical studies, and that the books I have written were a waste of time, But I don't think he meant that. He meant to affirm me as a colleague, as a physician, and it meant a lot to me to be affirmed in what I sensed was my primary vocation. So I join many of you today to say that a giant has fallen.
I dreamed a dream so fair. I stood in old Jerusalem beside the temple there. I heard the children sing, and ever as they sang, I heard the voice of angels from heaven in answer rang. I heard the voice of angels from heaven in answer rang. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, oh, how the angels sing, Hosanna in the highest, Hosanna to your King. And then I saw my dream was changed. The streets no longer rang. Hushed were the glad hosannas. No little children sang. The sun grew dark with mystery. The morn was cold and chill, as the shadow of a cross arose upon a lonely hill, as the shadow of a cross arose upon a lonely hill. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, oh, how the angels sing, Hosanna in the highest, Hosanna to our King. And once again the scene was changed. New earth there seemed to be. I saw the holy city beside the tideless sea. The light of God was on its streets. The gates are opened wide, and all who would might enter, and no one was denied. No need of moon or stars by night, or the sun to shine by day. It was the new Jerusalem that would not pass away. It was the new Jerusalem that would not pass away. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, oh, how the angels sing, Hosanna in the highest, Hosanna forevermore. Hosanna in the highest.
Thank you, Pastor Miguel, for that rendition of reminding us of what we have to look forward to, the Holy City. Are you looking forward to that? Let me see you wave your hand. If you're looking forward to the Holy City. We pray it would not be long from now. At the end of the prayer and during the postlude, we're going to I want you to know that there's a reception for everyone at the fellowship hall, just to the left here. We're going to ask that everyone remain seated during that time while the family is escorted to the fellowship hall, and you can greet them there as soon as the postlude is over. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear Father in heaven, our hearts have been touched and moved and inspired by the life of this gentle giant, Monty Murdoch. We thank you that you allowed his life to intersect with ours. We pray that we will take pages from his life and incorporate them into our own and live our best lives as well. We pray for his dear, precious wife, Becky, for their children, extended family members, and loved ones, and may they keep his memory alive, dear Father. May they constantly speak of him. May they reflect on the pictures of him and on the memories that they have in their hearts of him. And we long for that day when we will enter the holy city, a place where there will be no more sadness, no more sorrow, no more goodbyes, but forever and ever we will live in the glory of your love and of your peace. This is our prayer in the blessed name of Jesus. And everyone said, amen.